whoever advertises comes alive. So much of energy, so much of enthusiasm, so much of conviction. Now, when we speak about Christ to our children or to our cousins, to our neighbors, do we come alive? Do we burn with passion? Is our enthusiasm infectious, contagious, in the positive sense of the word? So the first one, a loving relationship with Christ. Second one, do I pass on that relationship with passion, with ardor, with energy, with enthusiasm? You know, the word enthusiasm, I love it. It comes from two Greek words, entheos, God within. When you have God within, you bubble with life. You become enthusiastic. You send out energy. You affect people for the better. The third is about needing to know the story of Israel. This might sound strange to you. Why do I need to learn about Israel? You know, we Christians make a very sad mistake. We all the time talk about the people of Israel as a people that have been unfaithful to God, a people that let down God, a people that turned apostate, a people that crucified Jesus. But the truth is that God was into those people. God revealed himself gradually, progressively, little by little, all the time to himself. And Jesus would come as the fulfillment of all the scriptures of Israel. And notice what happens. There is this faithful Yahweh and there is this faithful Jesus, the faithful Israel. And when they meet, there is salvation. And so if you really want to make yours salvation offered by God, then you need to know the covenant. You need to know the law. You need to know what the promise is. You need to know how God communicated with his people and led them through life and drew them unto himself. Unless and until you and I know the story of Israel, you and I will not know God at all. Because Jesus comes as a fulfillment of all the prophecies, of all the law. And when you want to know that Jesus, who is an Israelite in himself, we need to know the story of Israel. In fact, we are the new Israel. We are the extension of Israel. And when we study that, we are actually learning the way God is leading us unto himself. So the first one, a personal relationship with Jesus. The second, preaching Jesus Christ with a lot of zest, with a lot of energy, enthusiasm. Third, knowing the story of Israel. And four, knowing culture. The culture that we live in, the culture that surrounds us, the culture that overtakes us. Just so you know, I have 2 daughters by adoption, and I have 2 grandchildren, and I'll be with them 36 days from now. The countdown has started. Now, when I want to talk to my girls or to my grandchildren, I need to know where they are. When I discuss family life or economic status or whatever, I really need to know how they process, how much they take in, or how much I need to step in, or how much I need to step aside, because they're grown-ups. Now, when you are going out with the good news of salvation, with the gospel of Jesus Christ, bringing Christ to people, you need to know where people are. Otherwise, how do you meet their needs? You will be talking a language and they'll be talking another language. Try talking to your grandchildren who are in their teens. You'll know what I'm talking about. Do you speak the same language? Do you know where they are? Do you know the challenges that they face in that little age, at that stage in life? We need to know our culture if we want to be effective evangelizers. And that is why, we priests and deacons are asked to preach with the Bible in one hand and what in the other? Newspaper. A newspaper. In fact, Karl Barth, the famous theologian, Protestant theologian, said that in the 19th century, every preacher should preach with the Bible in one hand and newspaper in the other. And what did the council documents tell us, Vatican II, that we need to be able to read the signs of the times. Look at our culture. It is awash with secularization, with money, with worldliness, with every kind of stuff. And unless and until you know your client, you will not seal the deal. Unless and until you know your enemy, you will not win the battle. And therefore, do you make an attempt to study the culture? Even as parents, forget about Jesus Christ and the Church of God. Think of your own children and grandchildren. Do you really get to listen to them without judgment, without a word of advice? Seeing you, will your grandchildren run or come running to you? Think about it. That's the culture that I'm talking about. When you want to pass on the message of Jesus Christ to people who have turned away from Him, we need to know where they are. And for us, not just for the laity, but also for the pastoral leadership team, after I took charge at St. John Vianney, how many people left? Some of them may have gone away because of my spirituality or my style of preaching, or it may be my administrative decisions that I made. It happens when a pastor takes charge of the parish. People go away, and it's natural. I'm not blaming myself. And yet, I need to have what people call in business world an exit interview. How many persons did I sit down with and say, okay, I'm sorry to let you go, but would you like to tell me why? And if you and I sit down and listen to them, we will learn so much about the way we are churching, the way we are preaching, the way we are communicating Jesus Christ. In other words, we need to know our culture. A personal relationship with Jesus. What is the second? Preaching with new ardor or enthusiasm in an interesting way. And third, know the story of Israel. And fourth, know the culture. And fifth, know your tradition. We are Catholics, Roman Catholics. We have the Word, the Scriptures. We also have the Eucharist and the sacraments. And we have what we call tradition. Think of the way a river moves, all the time widening and deepening just by the flow. That's what I would call tradition. How the Church, by the inspiration of God and guidance of the Spirit, has found her way through the centuries. As families, we have our own traditions. As couples, you try to leave behind traditions for your children. And as a church, we have our own tradition. Not just in the rules that we make, but also in the lives of the saints, we have traditions. And so as Catholics, we need to learn what those are, and while using the Scriptures, all the sacraments, we should not be unmindful of the traditions that we have been blessed with 2,000 years of history. They are an integral part of how we communicate Jesus Christ to people, how we spread our faith, and how we evangelize. And what number is that? 5. And then we have the 6th one, what I would tend to call having a missionary's heart. How many of you have been part of the concert Madame Butterfly? Oh, Giacomo Puccini, the famous composer of Madame Butterfly, was undertaking a new composition called Turandot. The man knew that he wouldn't live to complete it. And so he called the students around and said, when I die and I'm gone, will you promise to do something for me? And they all said, sure. And he got them to promise that they will complete his composition should he die before completion. And sure enough, a couple of months later, Puccini died. And the students came together. They took the scores that the master left. They studied it. They imbibed the spirit, got a feel for it, and they knew exactly the spirit and the mind and the heart of the master and how this piece was moving. And they together sat and completed that composition. A couple of years later, when this was being performed in Australia, where is that place called? Sydney Opera House. Arturo Tosini, he was the conductor. And he conducted it, and the audience was enjoying it. And at one point, he stopped, turned to the audience and said, it is here that the master died. The students took up the work and brought it to completion. And with that, he turned around and continued conducting. And what a concert it was. The audience was swept away, and they applauded and applauded and applauded for minutes and minutes. Only because the students studied the mind and the heart of the master. They imbibed his spirit. They felt his soul, and they were able to complete. Today, Jesus actually began a composition, and he left it to us, not just to priests, to the nuns, and to the religious, but to every baptized. And that is why you are baptized a priest, a prophet, a king. And are you willing to step into the shoes of the Master? It means becoming another Christ. It means going out as a missionary, as an apostle, and telling people about the good news that God has for them, that He is in love with them. And that can happen only when you have a missionary heart. The word missionary also necessarily means a movement, an approaching, a going to somebody else and offering them what you have experienced. And again, a missionary can only express what he has experienced. She can only tell what she has tasted. As the Greeks of old would say, what you do not have, you cannot give. As a being, so it acts. Philosophy. And so if you are a missionary, are you filled with the Spirit of Christ? Can you call yourself another Christ and continue the role of Christ, the mission of Christ, as Christ would do? That would be new evangelization. And so we have those 6. And finally, we also have one more. We need to love the new media. You know, I'm talking to you. I could have definitely come up with some slides, some PowerPoints, or some other way. But how do we make the message of Christ relevant? This is more for the pastoral leadership. Even our liturgy, how do we make it lively? How do we use the new media to attract people, to reach people? You know, they say that if for things to be absorbed by people, I'm running out of time. I'll wind up. Yeah. For people to absorb something, it needs to be repeated to them 7 to 8 times, at least in 5 or 6 different forms. And only then people remember at least 6% of what they are told. And in that way, do we as a Church of God, in your own parish, or even as Cursillo, or as the Legion of Mary, or as parents, do we use the modern technology, the new media, in order to bring the word of Christ to people? And so, that is what new evangelization is all about. So, primary evangelization would be reaching people who have not heard of Christ. Secondary evangelization or new evangelization would be evangelizing, catechizing, and spreading the good news that God loves people to those who are de-churched, to those who are staying away from the church, or even those that are in the pews. And how do we do it? If you're looking for an audience, I think we have them right at home. Our children, our grandchildren, maybe our siblings or our extended families. So those are the 7 ways that I would at the moment think of when I think of new evangelization. Now, I can also paint for you an image of a church that immerses itself in new evangelization. What would be the characteristics of that community? For example, that would be a community with radical inclusivity. A community that would meet people where they are, welcome them into their midst, and offer them hospitality. Not just coffee and donut, but sharing of ideas. Hospitality has more to do with opening your mind and heart than opening the door to your house or to your church. So, in that sense, are you radically inclusive? You know, when someone comes into the church for the first time, you know what they feel? They feel judged. They feel convicted. They find that they are out of place. And even we, when we see them and say, hey, why are they here? Who are they? But is that the radical inclusivity that Christ practiced all his life? That would be one of the elements of a church that engages in new evangelization. Another would be a sense of belonging. You know, when people come into the church that engages in this kind of new evangelization, people would feel a sense of belonging. This is my church. This is my people. They are me. I am them. We are a family of faith. You know, I don't know, but probably some of you may have read the book, Engaged Church, Growing as an Engaged Church. In one line, that book can be summarized. Belonging precedes believing. Or, to put it simply, belonging comes before believing. People don't come to church because they believe, because they want to belong. But think of your children, your grandchildren, the millennials. They want to belong. And when people belong, and then they will start believing. So, radical inclusivity, basic, a sense of belonging, that could be another. A church that engages in new evangelization also is a church that listens to people. You know, when someone comes into the church, we make them sit down and say, all right, now listen, we know what exactly you need, and we give them all that we have studied. Instead, how about sitting with them, listening to their story, feeling their pulse, knowing where they are, and then we'll be able to respond to their need. In the church, we say Jesus Christ is the answer. But have we paused to ask ourselves what the question is in the first place? How can you give an answer without knowing the question?